I knit. My mum taught me to knit. She knitted the most amazing jumpers. I knit squares. About 10 years ago, I was introduced to psychedelic squares. A work colleague showed me a picture of the blanket she was making. Immediately, I knew that I wanted to make a blanket just like that. I wanted it to be bright, bold, and vibrant. When I got home from work, I downloaded a pattern for psychedelic squares and I started knitting. I was soon hooked on knitting these little squares. Here's one. And I soon had a pile of them. I had great fun arranging them on the floor, imagining the blanket that one day I would have. There was one problem with this plan. I really didn't like sewing the squares together. So my pile of squares never became a blanket. They ended up in a bag in the cupboard in the spare room, where they stayed until 2021. In the spring of that year, we were having a bit of a tidy up, and Ian was tidying the cupboard in the spare bedroom. Ian's my husband. He found my bag of squares. Sweetheart, do you really want these? Are you ever going to do anything with them? Yes, I said, that's my psychedelic blanket. I grabbed the bag off him and I took it downstairs. Now, in the autumn of 2021, two quite big things happened. The first big thing to happen is that I got pneumonia and I was in hospital for 2 weeks. I'd never been seriously ill before and it was really scary, especially as the pneumonia didn't respond to antibiotics. When I was discharged, I was on a high dose of steroids. At that time, I didn't really know anything about steroids, except that they're a banned substance at the Olympic Games. I soon found out that they are a stimulant. During that autumn, I don't think I slept the whole night through. And it was during one of these dark nights when I was sitting downstairs wondering how I was going to fill the hours until morning that I spied my bag of squares. I opened it and it was as though the squares were calling to me, it's time for us to become a blanket. So I started sewing them together. And during the long nights of that autumn, my blanket emerged. It was everything that I dreamt it would be. It was bright, it was bold, it was vibrant, it was beautiful. The other big thing to happen that autumn was that a car went into the front of our house, causing considerable damage. I will never forget that day. It was the 5th of November and it was a beautiful autumn day. I'd gone for a walk, and as I drove home, I noticed that something wasn't quite right about our house. I soon saw that our front wall was missing and that there was a car in our front garden and that it had hit our house. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but the damage to our house was so extensive that we weren't allowed into the house for a whole month. Except for the occasions when we met with the insurers to assess the damage. One Saturday, we had an appointment to meet the company who were going to be doing the clean-up of our lounge. It was the first time that we'd been allowed into the lounge. We opened the door and the scene before us was like something out of a battleground. There were bricks everywhere, shards of glass covered everything, furniture was turned over and battered. The man doing the clean-up said, "Sorry, can't do anything about this. Everything's going to have to go." He picked up my blanket, which had been hanging over the back of the chair in the window, so it had taken the full force of the car hitting the house. "No," I said, "you can't have that. You can't have it." He looked a bit surprised because it was just a blanket. But to me, that blanket was a symbol of my recovery and nobody was going to take it from me. Seeing how upset I was, he finally agreed that we could keep the blanket. He put it in a bag and he made us promise that when we opened this bag, if there was any glass in the blanket at all, we would throw it away. Well, our house was repaired and I recovered from pneumonia. And the blanket ended up back in the cupboard in the spare room. Until earlier this year, when we were doing another spring clean. Well, I say we, I was actually sitting in the garden enjoying the sunshine and Ian was doing the tidying up. Suddenly he appeared by my side and he was holding a bag. I knew immediately what was in that bag. "Are you ready? Do you want me to open it? You know what the man said? If there's any glass at all, we're going to have to throw the blanket away." "Yes," I said, "just open it." Very slowly, he opened the bag and pulled the blanket out. I'd forgotten how beautiful it was. Very gently, he ran his hand down the blanket. And miraculously, there wasn't one piece of glass on that blanket. My beautiful psychedelic blanket had survived the devastation to our house, just as we had. I have the blanket here. You can see that it's not quite finished. I don't know whether I will ever finish it. You see, it's a reminder to me that life is colourful, it's bright, and it's sometimes messy. It's also unfinished, and my story won't be finished until the final square is sewn into place.